Welcome to the Future of Tourism podcast. I'm David Peacock.
Stop owning your own content.
Young leaders are stepping up.
Bring everyone to the table
and imagine their world anew.
You can't really do sustainable grassroots tourism development without extensive community and civic engagement. My two guests today have both done extensive work in developing nations as well as domestically. As we as destinations work on our own journeys of engagement, alignment, and relevance, there's a lot to be learned about how to foster, build, maintain, and channel engagement from their years of work in the field. Greg Takehara is the CEO of the humanistic global tourism development and enabling organization that you and I know as Tourism Cares. Chris Seek is the CEO of the global tourism consultancy Solimar International, founded in 2001 to create and empower local tourism expertise through education and training. Good morning, Greg. How are you? Where are you? What's it like?
Good morning, David. It's great to be with you. I, like so many others in the state of Florida, are hunkering down in preparation of Hurricane Milton. I guess you could say, fortunately, I'm not on the coast, so I didn't have to evacuate. But even here in Orlando, Milton is very concerning. It's going to pass over the state. It looks like it's projected to go over Orlando as a hurricane. Like I said, we're just buckling up right now.
Well, after 2 weeks ago, all bets are off on being inland. You know, Asheville is well inland, that's for sure. So our thoughts are with you and all the people of Florida as you get ready for this one. Best to you.
Thank you.
All right. Chris, how are you? Where are you? What's it like?
Yeah, David, it's great to be here. So I'm in sunny Washington, D.C. It's a beautiful fall day here. This is my favorite time of the year to be in D.C., so enjoying the weather. But thinking about our folks in Tampa and in Florida. Last time we were all together, we were in Tampa, and you can see that it's right on the bullseye there, and worried about everyone that we got to know, and some great organizations down there. They're doing some great work, and just hope that the tourism industry can weather through this and help support whatever comes out of this.
Well, thanks for that. And the last time the three of us were together was Tampa, and it's quite amazing to stand in that area with the beachfront so close and the canals and think about a 2 or 3 meter storm surge rolling through. Not a pleasant proposition. All right, listen, off the top, people generally know what you do. People have a high awareness of Tourism Cares and Solimar, but for the listeners, Greg, if you don't mind going first, what is it Tourism Cares is all about?
Well, as you know, I mean, I hope we're becoming more of a household name. But for those who don't know, we're a 20-year plus nonprofit organization that was born out of the travel industry. In particular, 3 different associations, 2 that are tour operator centric, the United States Tour Operators Association and the National Tour Association, as well as ASTA, the American Society of Travel Advisors. So our foundation is really with tour operators and travel advisors, but we have over 160 members that span the entirety of the industry. And we bring the industry together and we use its positive impact to help the people and places of travel thrive. And I think right now, especially as I referenced with Milton, I think we know how valuable our assets are, the people and places of travel. And right now they're in jeopardy, and they're in jeopardy all over the world. And I think that's what we want to bring the industry together to focus on.
Well, Tourism Care certainly is no stranger to disaster relief support, but you turned that corner a number of years ago and are really focusing now on developmental work in emerging destinations and also, established destinations that are looking to change paths, which is a good segue into speaking to Chris. Chris, tell us a little bit about Solimar. And I will admit this, until I met you in person, I had a very low knowledge of what you did. And then when I went back and read the breadth of work that you've been working on, and both of you have worked together, I think probably as much as 10 years ago on boards and the like, but tell us a little bit about Solimar, please.
Yeah, happy to, David. I'm excited to be here today. I've been a long time listener of your podcast and really enjoyed some of the work that you're doing to kind of talk about the future of tourism and where we need to be going. And yeah, and to be here with Greg, I had the privilege of serving on the board with him on many years back when my chairman, Donald Dr. Hawkins, stepped back. He and invited me, and the board invited me on. And that was exciting to be part of Tourism Cares because you can see how the tourism industry can really make a difference. And that organization is proof of that and can show that every day. And so a little bit about Solimar. I started it over 20 years ago and really focused in on the developing world, recognizing, first of all, I had a love for the developing world. I traveled to over 86 countries and just fell in love with some of these beautiful places and seeing what was happening without anyone at the wheel, helping guide tourism in the right direction. And so started off trying to sell services directly to eco lodges in Costa Rica and realized how challenging that was. And then stumbled upon the international development kind of industry that's based here in Washington, D.C. So everyone from USAID, the World Bank, Inter-American Development Bank, all the big conservation NGOs were based here. And they were all increasingly using tourism as a development tool. So if you wanted to use tourism to support poverty alleviation or resource conservation, what better tool to use is to leverage this incredible industry to bring the industry together, the visitor, to support those efforts. So been doing that for about 20 years, worked in over 60 different countries, but more recently been doing a lot of work in the US, helping destinations that are kind of moving into this destination stewardship space. So helping them, guide them in this process, and even rural communities in working in one community in New Hampshire where they didn't have a DMO, and kind of helped bring together all the different leaders of the destination to understand the opportunity with supporting the visitor economy and working towards that effort. So that's really what we do, is specializes in kind of using the power of tourism as a force for good and bringing people together to make tourism work for their communities.
Well, and I really want to drill into today that getting people together. How do you engage people to create something enduring and strategic that has sustainable or even regenerative possibilities? And with that, Greg, I'm going to turn to the Meaningful Travel Summits, because I had a very brief ability to attend Meaningful Travel in Panama before I was sidelined with some other stuff. It's a fascinating process, but when I was out with you in the jungles of Achioto near the Panama Canal area, it struck me just how much work had gone into creating that moment that day when 40 or 50 of us showed up on a bus and met with people who live in that community and worked with them. But I will point out, on the bus with us were people from the Ministry of Tourism, people from Promptour Panama, people from civic government. So I started to think about just the incredible depth of engagement that went into creating a Meaningful Travel Summit. So tell us a little bit about Meaningful Travel Summits, why you do them, and then let's talk about the complexity of those stakeholders and how you get them together. And Chris, you've been to these things, you know them as well, so please weigh in. But Greg, tell us about Meaningful Travel Summits.
Yes, well, I mean, you had alluded to it before, David, but there was a time where a lot of our work really focused around disaster recovery. We did a lot of events that were really referenced as cleanup events in the aftermath of Katrina, in New Orleans and other places that really kind of needed that pickup by the industry. Sometimes it was really to put the hand up to say they're ready for tourism again. Sometimes it was to help them rebuild their tourism infrastructure. But it was a lot of, painting fences and planting and moving dirt around. And as much as that roll up the sleeves type of experience is really gratifying for the travel professional to give back, we understood it wasn't as lasting. And I think it's unfortunate today that we're seeing that these natural disasters are happening every other week. But we pivoted to a much deeper sense of global impact, working, as you mentioned, with not only emerging destinations, but also, as you mentioned, established organizations, because established destinations, because it's important to show best practices from those established destinations, as well as show what's really beneath in terms of the developing destinations. And in Panama in particular, we were really fortunate to have a long runway. We had been invited along with Shannon Stoll from the Adventure Travel Trade Association and a representative from the UNWTO to judge a community experiences contest in Panama. And what that did was that brought some 50 semifinalists that it was really our job to listen to them do really short 2 to 5 minute presentations, and then bring it down to 4 finalists and one ultimate winner. And for that ultimate winner, that winning experience was life changing, because they got to attend the Adventure Travel World Summit in Hokkaido, Japan. They also got to attend the USTOA annual conference in Los Angeles at that time, and other industry events, which was just completely eye-opening for them.
So, who were the winning? Who were the participants in the winning bid at that point?
The winning bid had to do with sea turtle development, and it was just amazing, because these are not these are not the types of experiences that go to the types of trade shows or industry events that we get to go to, and that's really where we want to put the focus. So, kind of to hopefully make this a little shorter story, in working with destinations, we used to find hosts for our meaningful travel summits. And one of the outputs used to be that we would develop a meaningful travel map with them, where we would establish some what we call map pins, or impact partners, that are typically local community experiences that need that connection to mass tourism, that we can make that connection for them, that they can see the power of tourism, and see that economic benefit that they can gain, but they just don't have the connection points. And a lot of times it is exactly that, working with the local DMO, working with receptive tour operators, working with nonprofits and local community partners. But going back to this contest, this was really our foundation for building our meaningful travel map of Panama, working with the Ministry of Tourism, working with that entity, and then doing our summit. And actually, this week, the ATTA is hosting their World Summit in Panama. So we are looking at a very long runway, which I think, to go to your point, shows the level of engagement that it takes to really build out a summit like the Meaningful Travel Summit. It is really bringing a lot of people to the table. And then that allows us to bring the industry to that place, get them out into the community, educate them, inspire them, and then activate them, because they will go back with such incredible learnings and hopefully a lot of inspiration.
So that long runway is a long runway up to a moment, even like the event we attended. It's also a runway up to a future of tourism for that place that's sustainable or regenerative. Chris, when you start to work in some of these projects, and you've worked in Bangladesh and the Maldives, you've worked in South America, you're working domestically, when you approach grassroots tourism development from the idea that you have to bring people into the tent, the question to you is this: doesn't that automatically create a network that nurtures, or at least protects, I won't say guarantees, the sustainability of projects? That wide base of tourism, often we're trying to add it into projects in sophisticated destinations. We built them and now we need supporters. Is it fair to say you guys build from the ground up?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, Greg's example there just shows you the power of the tourism industry. That work was being done. Those community organizations, those entrepreneurs were out there trying to make a difference with tourism, using tourism as a way to save sea turtles, fantastic project. But it wasn't until the industry came together, put a spotlight on that, kind of helped kind of show how awesome it is, and highlight it, that all of a sudden the ministries and the local governments and everyone's on the bus with you. So I think that that's really what the opportunity is with organizations like Tourism Cares, is to help those destinations really put a spotlight on that. But going back to your question there, David, I think that, I'm in a different kind of space, because oftentimes I'm brought in not for the sake of developing tourism. I'm often asked to say, hey, here's a development challenge. We have, the habitat of the Western gorilla is in danger because of the amount of communities that live around them in Uganda, and they are encroaching on those protected areas and doing illegal things in those protected areas. So how do we stop that? And what it comes down to is the fact that they need to generate income. They need to put food on their plates for their families. And if they're not able to do that, they're going to turn to distractive industries. So we need to look at ways that we can get them to become conservation partners. And what better way to turn a poacher into a conservation partner is to teach them how to be a tour guide. I mean, those guys know better than anyone how to track down, the species and to be able to show people about their habitat and things like that. And so that's what we're often asked to do, is to go in and kind of handle the tourism industry that is oftentimes in a nascent area of development. They're just getting started. There often isn't any organization. I think that's one of the things why I'm such a big fan of the DMOs, especially in US, Canada, is that, they are leaders for their destination, and they help bring people together to talk about tourism and what the tourism, priorities need to be from the visitor's experience down to the communities. And we're seeing that conversation shift a lot now to focusing on the communities. But in these developing countries, like in Bangladesh and the Maldives, where we've been working, there was no tourism organization. It was every man for themselves or every woman for themselves. Everyone's out there trying to do their own thing. There's no collective effort when it comes to destination marketing or resource conservation. And so when we go in and bring them together, that's where we start. We start with the business community, because I know I've worked with plenty of tourism businesses. They care about their destination. Yes, they want to make money, but at the end of the day, they care more than anyone about the communities and conservation. So let's start with them. Let's get them to understand the benefits of working together. And then once we engage the private sector and we get them understanding this, it's easier to bring the government to the table, because now we have a unified private sector. They're saying that conservation is important. They're saying community livelihoods are important. And so the government likes to hear that, and they step up and they want to be a part of that. So I feel like that's the advantage I'm in, is that, again, we're not being asked to go in and drive tourism to the Horsburgh Atoll of the Maldives. This is 3 islands. They're local tourism there. It's community tourism. It's fantastic tourism. These guys build these amazing guest houses, and it's a fraction of the cost of some of the resorts that are out there. But most people don't know about this. So we brought those guest houses together. We got them to talk about what their shared interests were. And of course, getting more marketing was definitely a priority, but they wanted to improve the relationship with the local residents, the local island councils. They wanted to get more women involved in the tourism industry, so they didn't have to import workers, and they wanted to protect their environment. And so that became the focus of that organization from day one, instead of focusing just on putting heads in beds, which many of our other destination organizations kind of got started in that direction and now are moving to more of a stewardship and community focus. But that's the advantage that I'm in. And so what I'm saying is, let's learn from these other organizations, and let's start from the very beginning with focusing on having a purpose that's more than just marketing.
Well, I'm glad you said that. In a sense, we're moving towards these stewardship things, because it's not politically incorrect to say for the past 20 years we've been in a product and optimized product sale model here in North America. We've done really well about it. We are shifting to engagement. I would say the best destinations run by the best people, and I could give you a list, off the back of my hand as who they are all about engagement. But I see a deficit here in North America, and we came to I will tell you my own personal opinion. COVID had a lot to do with us waking up to the idea of the necessity of engagement. So in that context, where you work with local stakeholders, and I go back to the Verde River project. I know it's a really old one for you, but I loved it. So here's a project that actually ends up being a tourism project, but it didn't start that way, did it?
No, it was actually the Walton Family Foundation had a goal of preserving the Verde River. And the Verde River was a threat because there's a lot of development happening in Arizona, as we all know, and more of that's moving north and outside the Phoenix area. And as more development was happening, there was a concern that no one was valuing the river. And they were giving a lot of support to conservation organizations who were doing some great work. But as they said, it's like kind of felt like they were kind of just speaking to themselves. And they said, how do we really create an economic value of the river? And so we said, well, let's look at tourism. Let's see if tourism can create an interest in this river. And so we went in and met with all the mayors and the local chambers of commerce from the communities that are all adjacent to this Verde River. So this is Camp Verde, this is Jerome, this is looking at Cottonwood. And, one of the things we realized is you got Sedona right down the road with over 2 million visitors, a world-class tourism destination, amazing place. And we're like, if we could just get some of those visitors to come down to the Verde River and enjoy this place and enjoy the river, and more people getting on that river, then the communities would prioritize its conservation. And so we went in and talked to Sedona. At the time, Jennifer Wesselhoff was the CEO, and she was open arms. I love this. This is very important to us. We want to get our people out in the region, so let us get behind this. We brought National Geographic in and created one of these geotourism projects where we basically used the power of the National Geographic brand to convene all the tourism people and the mayors, but also the conservation organizations. And we got to work on how do we promote this river while at the same time conserving it at the same time.
But it literally started with an idea. Conserving the river was the imperative, and then using tourism to amplify the story and to tell the behaviors and model the behaviors became the leverage for moving forward. Okay, so Greg, you've just finished, is it Willamette Valley? You've just finished your Meaningful Travel Tourism Summit. What would you say was the unifying theme there? The thing that people, I haven't talked to Anne from Simpleview yet about her trip to Willamette, so tell me.
Well, I think we try to create really action principles, and those action principles are around, as I mentioned before, uniting, educating, inspiring, activating. And I think really that's to us where the focus is. You know, we can bring forth the local community and bring forth examples, but we really need to create that inspiration point. And we call that on our second day, our experience day. That is the opportunity to get out into the local community and meet with these impact partners and see the kind of community experiences that have been developed that tourism oftentimes is just simply not aware of. So this is the connection point. And you know, where I kind of analogize it to our prior work doing disaster recovery, this is, you know, instead of rolling up our sleeves, we're rolling up our minds. You know, I mean, we may not be getting our hands dirty in the same way, but we're creating that connection point to really get to see and feel these community enterprises. And in this case, in Willamette Valley, we were just blessed with a plethora of brilliant examples in terms of, you know, this is a famous wine region, but their appreciation of the terroir is extraordinary in terms of the regenerative principles, the biodynamics that go into their winemaking. This was eye-opening to me, who's somebody who just loves to pop uncork a bottle and enjoy, to find out how much respect for the land that they have and how much they incorporate indigenous principles into their winemaking. And with that, we had, an indigenous tour as well too, to take that step into the history of the Willamette Valley. We had other tours that took them to see the mural art in that particular city of Eugene, which was just incredibly robust. And there's a huge history around it. And there are, to Chris's point, some incredible tour guides who know the history and are the best storytellers possible. And so for the industry, whether you're a tour operator thinking about how do we incorporate these community experiences into our itineraries, or you're a travel advisor advising your client about where to go and have a really authentic experience, this is a valuable, as I mentioned, touch point or hopefully inspiration point for everybody to take away and walk away from.
So, well, the latest Meaningful Travel Summit sounds like an opportunity to demonstrate to the world some of the great assets of this place, but it also created opportunity then for new tourism players and entities to come forward, your early indigenous work, the work on touring murals and stuff. So there you're using it to teach the world about some best practices, but also to empower some groups inside that destination to do more, to spread their wings.
Yeah. I mean, I think we've already kind of touched upon that. I mean, Chris has mentioned, how the very deliberate efforts to bring everybody to the table, private sector, government, NGOs. And I think to your point, the summit is a culmination of that effort of bringing so many different entities to the table and creating that connection point, and for there to be a tremendous understanding. I think that it's interesting, the evolution, like I said, between disaster recovery. For us, there still is a little bit of that element, because we know everything is in jeopardy. And we're talking about conservation. We're talking about preserving our assets, the things that we sell in this industry that are in jeopardy, and that, quite frankly, are in this very fragile place, where we have to put an emphasis on it. So I think, one of my favorite examples is just when we went to Puerto Rico in 2019, and it was in the aftermath of Hurricane Maria. But it wasn't about just going in and doing a cleanup. It was talking about food security and food sovereignty, which was a very kind of unknown term to me. And to see a panel of local community stakeholders, farmer, co-op, alongside a major hotel chain, speaking to how they need to work together to ensure that the next time they have a Hurricane Maria, because being in a vulnerable place like Puerto Rico, that is almost an inevitability, unfortunately, that they need to work together. And they had to rebuild trust. There was clearly a lack of trust previously from some of the relationships that had been built. But Maria, when you mentioned COVID and how that, was a really convening point for the industry, I think Maria for Puerto Rico showed them that we have to work together in order to be able to rebuild and rebuild stronger. And we need to be able to, we have to focus on, our reliance on sourcing outside of the island, and try to work together to better that percentage of crops that they can rely on island, as well as things like clean water that are so necessary to that whole process. So just to hear how they're working together, and just the ability to bring them all to the table together, is exactly what we're talking about in terms of engagement.
Well, I really like the way you framed it. So the necessity to communicate across groups in the face of an adversity, and that's often the case. So it stratifies, they stratify. It's funny, I was listening to a clip of Brad Dean talk last night, and he's talking about the challenges they've been through. And I was kind of giggling at the end of it, because it was 2020 and he hadn't mentioned COVID, and the list was already as long as my arm and harrowing. And I thought, and then they went through COVID, it was amazing. But you talked about, using that fostering that interconnectivity to deal with crisis. And then in there, they look at things like regeneration. They look at resilience, especially, post Maria. Chris, you're working on some stuff that's really, really integrated, from the building of the network that you needed to get the work done. You've been working in Colorado with the Colorado Tourism Office for a number of years now. Is it 4 years?
Yeah, just about 4 years. Yeah, 2 years on the stewardship plan.
Yeah. It culminated in the last couple of weeks with a really big announcement. But I mean, that's a case of working from beginning of a prospect. How do we protect this house? How do we take care of this place, right through the engagement of multiple partners to very, very high level sustainability and regenerative principles worked into that white paper. Tell us a little bit about the CTO plan and its engagement piece.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, one thing that we recognize, right, the three of us that definitely understand, is that the tourism industry is an industry that cares about the destinations. We love what we do, right? There is no one more passionate about your destination than someone who works in a destination organization. That's just the reality. Or a tour guide, right? They are just people who just care about their place. And oftentimes, though, tourism gets a bad rap, because I think some people who aren't in the industry just see the visitors coming in and just think that all the tourism industry cares about is making money, and they don't care about the fact that there's traffic in my community or that visitors are behaving badly. But we know that's not the case. We know that the tourism industry wants our residents to be happy and wants our wildlife to be protected. And that's just the reality. So when we started off with the Colorado Tourism Office, we had that conversation And we said, like, look, there's two ways we can approach this. We can stay narrow and we can just have a conversation with our tourism partners. We can focus on the industry associations, the DMOs, and our tourism businesses. There's a lot of work that can be done there, but why not use this opportunity to widen the tent? Why not use this opportunity to show everyone in Colorado that the tourism industry does care about its resources and it does care about its public land? And let's bring in those land managers. Let's bring in those conservation organizations. Let's bring in those tribal governments. Let's bring in residents. Let's bring in as many people as possible into these conversations. So one, we can get their perspective, because if we want to talk about impacts to public lands, we can't find that out without talking to the experts. There are experts within those agencies that are doing some fantastic work to protect those places. But if we're not talking to them and we're not listening to them and learning about what their concerns are with tourism, during this process, one of the U.S. Forest Service land managers said to us, he said, look, it's great that Colorado has record numbers of visitors and record numbers of economic revenue coming into the state, but that doesn't do anything to our budget. We don't increase our manpower because you have more visitors. And so just understanding that and recognizing the constraints and challenges they have, it starts to then open up the conversation to what can the tourism industry do to address these problems. So when we went through this engagement process, we tried to be as inclusive as possible. We particularly went out and interviewed all these experts that were outside the non-traditional tourism industry. We used the onion as an analogy here, where we were peeling back the layers to understand what's the issue, who's working on this, what's already been done, what can we learn from other destinations that have dealt with this issue, and ultimately, what is the role of the tourism industry? You know, we can't solve all the problems, workforce housing, traffic on I-70 on a busy ski weekend. You know, there's not a lot that the tourism industry can do to solve those problems, but we can help. We can absolutely communicate to people that, hey, there's opportunities to take public transportation, hey, benefits on the lift line if you're able to take a carpool. So there are things that we can do as an industry to address these problems. And once we understand what they are and we identify what can be done, now we go back out to the industry and say, hey, here's how we can make a difference in Colorado, and this is what we need to do. And everyone's super excited about this. And those partners were also really appreciative of the tourism industry stepping up and saying, what can we do to help and how can we support those efforts?
So that takes us back to sort of the beginning then, the UN Sustainable Tourism Goals. And there's 17 of them. And if you go through them, the UNWTO has sort of itemized every single one of them for how it could be impactful through tourism. So even goal number 1, no poverty, the point is tourism provides income through job creation, local community levels. Jump to number 5, gender equality. Tourism can empower women, particularly through provision of direct jobs. Look at industry, innovation, and infrastructure. Tourism development relies on good public and private infrastructure, smart cities, etc. But even the UNWTO particularly focuses on tourism for its ability, and I really think it's important that we all remember and recognize, due to its cross-sectoral nature, tourism has the ability to strengthen public-private partnerships. That's what you're both doing. Do we get to play this sort of acceptable intermediary between private and public? Is that why people accept us? I'm seeing so much more work taking off now with tourism groups playing the intermediary between the river and the government and the citizen. Is that our new role and function as we go forward? Is that the future of tourism, as we are these catalytic intermediaries in placemaking? What do you think, Greg?
Well, I'm going to say that I'm going to leverage that as best as I possibly can, and I do. I think one of the real beautiful assets of Tourism Cares is that as an industry-born, organization, we don't function kind of like every NGO or nonprofit. We're born from the industry, and we represent the industry at large. And I think that's one of our greatest leverage points, is that we're trying to work on behalf of the travel industry, but we create that bridge. We foster that relationship with kind of the unknown, like the local communities, and bring them forward, so that our industry has a better understanding of working with destinations and working with their local communities, creating that bridge, creating that intersection. So I think we definitely play that role, and I think that in terms of tourism cares, we're uniquely placed because we don't necessarily come from an advocacy place, even though we are advocates.
Fair answer. Chris, you also part-time teaches, you're part-time executive in residence at George Washington University. Some of the best tourism development people I've met in the last 10 years have come out of there, and I met them all over the world, far-flung corners. They are network builders. They are alignment builders. Are you seeing a new cohort of young students or young peers who are ready to do that kind of work?
Absolutely. And put a plug in for GW. I'm actually teaching a course today in certificate in destination management. And I'm focused on investment and financing of sustainable tourism. And GW for a long time has specialized in this idea of sustainable destination management. How do we look at tourism as this entire conversation we've been talking about, right? Yes, we need to make tourism work. Let's not forget that. We have to do marketing. We've got to make the engine work. Visitors have to come to our destinations. They got to have great experiences. They've got to spend money. So there's no question that always has to be a core function of our destination organizations. But I think to your point, David, is we're seeing is that these destination organizations can play more than just that. They can be the champions. They can be the ones who set the table. Santiago down to visit Tampa gave a behind the scenes kind of view into his DMO we had a delegation of 12 different DMOs from Georgia and Armenia, the countries, and it was funded by USAID. We brought them to Tampa to learn from Visit Tampa and also the Destinations International Conference. And Santiago said, we don't wait to be invited to the table. We set the table and we bring people around the community that share an interest, and we help champion that and move that forward. And I think that is the unique position of destination organizations, because we do straddle the line between public and private. We do have the respect of our industry partners, and they see us as an important partner to help bring visitors there. But then our government says, hey, we want to work on diversity and inclusivity in our community. Hey, do you think you can work on that? Absolutely. Let me go talk to the industry. Let's get them rallied behind this, and we can do this. And you can see what they're doing. So I think that it's a very natural space. And it's exciting. I think the destinations that Greg works with, that he's invited to work in, are places that have already moved into this space. And for them to bring tourism cares to their community, what it does is puts a spotlight on that work, and it puts a spotlight on their mission, that they're not just putting heads in beds. That yes, they're going to do that, but they're also going to make sure at the same time that tourism is a force for good. And I think that's what this industry does, and organizations like Tourism Cares does, is it just brings people together and it helps people understand that, hey, let's all work together to make this place a better place through tourism.
Well, I'm glad you used that line. Tourism is a force for good, because I've seen work from both of you, as I say, at the very grassroots, literally scrabbling in the dirt level of building, asset development, right up to very sophisticated places that are looking to be more sustainable, equitable, regenerative. The common thread through all of them is engagement. You've said it over and over again here. Sometimes we get a great opportunity as Greg or Chris or David to go in and play l'étranger, and sometimes we get to be the thing that unlocks that engagement because we're net new. But in every case, what you're trying to do is plumb new relationships with people against goals that they share. I've always said, the best destinations are the result of engaged communities that take an active role in shaping their collective future, but they have to come to an agreement on what that future is. And sometimes we can play a great role. All right, we gone really long on this one. I intended it to be 30 minutes. I'm going to give you final thoughts. I'll go to you, Chris. Just final thoughts to people in the destination space as we look at the next 5 years of tourism, the necessity for engagement, the necessity to serve citizens first. I think we've stopped debating whether or not that's important. So any messages for your peers?
No, it's great. And it's been a wonderful conversation. And again, I'm a longtime listener to Future of Tourism. And I love that you started this conversation about how things are changing. And, obviously COVID did do something to kind of accelerate this. But at the end of the day, I think for our listeners that are from North America, that are kind of like, how do we do this? And what does this sound like? Engagement takes time, right? There's no question about it. It's time out of your day to go have coffee or have those conversations, bring people together. And sometimes those conversations might bring people together that aren't seeing eye to eye together, but that's part of our role, is to kind of find that common interest. And I think that, the work that I'm doing overseas with these new destinations, I think the opportunity to start from the very beginning. Imagine, for those that are listening that are from a traditional destination, if your destination was set up with the purpose of destination stewardship, with the purpose of community satisfaction and making sure they're benefiting from tourism. And marketing is part of that, but that was your focus for getting started. Think about how you would be perceived differently in your community and the way people would look at your role. And I think that that's the exciting thing for new destinations, but for those that are already established, that are looking to make this transition to more of a stewardship organization, I encourage you. I think the results are well worth it, because at the end of the day, it comes back to relevance and alignment and engagement. All of that happens when you take this approach, and it makes a better visitor destination as well. Ultimately, visitors enjoy places that are better managed and taking care of its resources.
Perfect. Greg, over to you.
Yeah, I just want to go back and focus on, the UN SDG number 17. I often say there's 16 sustainable development goals, and then one that is just a given, and that is 17. And that's really the way we treat it at Tourism Cares. Like so many organizations, we don't have the bandwidth to be able to focus on all 17 goals all of the time. So we tend to really, and I think especially when we're looking at the destination work, so if we're working with the likes of Willamette or whoever we are, maybe there's a greater social focus, maybe there's a greater environmental focus. That really allows us to hone in usually on like about 4 different SDGs. But the one constant is number 17, which is partnership for our goals. And I think there's so much that we can learn from it. And I just want to say that I so appreciate to be able to kind of share this room with Chris, because I think that's a perfect example of what partnership truly stands for. It's not a day-to-day engagement. We haven't been, we've known each other for a very long time, but I consider Solimar and Chris a partner and a long-standing partner, because when you look at partnerships, it's not about immediate outcomes. It's about all the unintended outcomes that really come about because we have fostered this relationship, this partnership for as long as we have, and because most importantly, we've taken the time to listen to each other, and we've asked each other, what do you need? Not so much, this is what I need and how can you help me, but what do you need? And I think that's the lesson for destinations right now, is destinations, any segment of the industry right now, is to reach out and ask the other person at the table, what do you need?
I think that's a great way to end this. So I will say to our listeners, if you don't follow Solimar International, you should. And if you're not a regular consumer of Tourism Cares, you should be. Lots of great work there. Lessons from the strangest places. I mean, I learned so much again, about tourism development from a bunch of indigenous people in Achiote who reminded me how important it is to be on the ground. I learned immense things from, high-level projects like Colorado. So thank you both for all your time. It's great to see you both. I hope to have you both back again, and keep doing the good work, please.